We met in a very dodgy Irish nightclub in North London. His mate went off with my mate and I couldn't find them, so I ended up with Kieran. I knew the first time I met him I was going to marry him. He was so kind. He'd do anything for anybody, so he would. And he was fun. He was a laugh. He just loved family life and, you know, having people around him and his friends around him. He was a hard worker. He loved his work. He was just an ordinary guy. He was just that special to me. Our wedding day was brilliant. It was just perfect from beginning to end. The church, I think, was both our favourite bits. I just knew it was the right thing. It was just so right. And you know, you just think, oh my God, all the exciting things that are going to happen. You know, what lays ahead is just going to be so exciting and so much fun. And life's just beginning, isn't it? He was working on a job and he said to me, oh, you'll never guess what happened. And he said, oh, I nearly got killed today. And I said, don't say that, don't say that. And he said, oh yeah, somebody was working above him and there was a gap in the deck and a block had fallen and just missed him. I just felt shivers up my spine and I said, oh, don't tell me, I don't want to know anymore. Because as a wife or a girlfriend to somebody who works in construction, I mean, your biggest fear is that they're never going to come home. Kieran was working on a job and he was working with a guy called Patsy. They'd been working together for weeks and they'd been working in the same section on this day and unfortunately there was an accident on site and Patsy got killed. And he said, oh, I've got to go to the funeral. He said, would you come with me? I don't really want to go on my own. And I said, yeah, that's fine. I remember seeing Patsy's wife and she looked so distraught that it was absolutely harrowing. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what would I ever do if that was me? And I remember turning to Kieran and saying, what would I ever do if that was you? And he turned to me and said, it'll never happen to me. Kieran's brother's name came up on the phone and I just knew straight away, because Kieran's brother wouldn't ring me usually. And he said, Jen, there's been an accident. And he said, but it's okay, the air ambulance are there. And at that point I said, he's dead. And I tried ringing for an hour and a half and I couldn't get anybody. I couldn't find out what was going on. And then Kieran's brother rang me again to say he'd spoken with the police and they wanted us to come to Limehouse Police Station. I got to Limehouse Police Station. They took us in a back way. We went up this narrow stairs and we walked into the room and Jazz was his name. He said to me, he goes, oh, Mrs. Deeney, I'm sorry to tell you, your husband was involved in an accident and he died on site this afternoon. Kieran was working in a lift shaft, but at the time when Kieran was working there were about 4 stories up, I think. On the static deck or the floating deck, where there had been a hole for access when people were coming up from the bottom, the hole had been covered. There was first aiders on site who attended to him. The air ambulance team arrived, but it was too late for Kieran. He couldn't be revived. His head injuries were massive. He'd fallen just over 30 feet. And he died in a lift shaft in Canary Wharf. Because he died on site, he went straight to the morgue in Popular. I wanted to see him. I suppose you want to see him because you want to know it was real, that it was actually him, it wasn't somebody else. But they wouldn't let me see him. I had to wait over 24 hours to see him. And then to see him just lying on this trolley with blood on his face and, you know, through a glass wall, and you can't touch them. And not being with Kieran when he died, for me, it's unforgivable, really. And people say it doesn't make sense, but it's, you know, you marry somebody and you love them and you should be with them when they need you, and I wasn't there when he needed me. That's just probably something I've got to live with. I know I couldn't have been there, but it still doesn't take away that you wanted to be there. He was buried nearly 14 weeks to the day after we got married, with the same people in the same church. If you're working on a construction site and you think health and safety is a load of old cobblers and, you know, I'm fine, I'm invincible, it's never going to happen to me, you know what? You carry on, but you sit. Take 30 seconds and sit and think of the impact this is going to have on your wife and your children and your brothers and your sisters and your friends. And you know, if you don't care about yourself, care about them, because you won't be here to pick up the pieces.